بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. We continue inshallah ta'ala our daily reflections from the Quran of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a divine system for us, mashallah, after created everything around us to benefit us, gave us the directions, gave us the Quran, revealed the message, sent the prophets. We believed in all these. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us now guidelines and disciplinary acts of how we behave as Muslims. And every day we're taking some of these remarks from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're all still in the second surah of the Quran, Al-Baqarah, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the opening of Al-Fatiha. Today, we are going to reflect on verse 221 from Surah Al-Baqarah, which talk about one of the most important institutions of the society, which is the marriage institution. A very important institution because it is what builds a society, right? This is what builds a community. This is what builds the world. This is what brings people to grow and to bring in families and offsprings and what have you. This is very crucial, very important. And because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't leave us all alone to have no directions, but rather gave us directions of what to do, and wanted us to make sure that we choose the right spouse. Because that's a partnership, that's a life partnership. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 221, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تنكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمن ولأمة مؤمنة خير من مشركة ولو أعجبتكم. So we will take the first part of this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. Now, this is for my dear brothers and sisters. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving a general rule about marriage. In this verse, the general rule that we're not allowed, male or female, to marry outside of our faith. We are not allowed. That's what the verse here, the general rule. Allah specifically in this verse is telling the male side of the society, do not marry non-Muslims until and unless they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless they become Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that وَلَا أَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving an example of a very simple believing woman, even if she is not a free woman at that time. As you know, that there were free women and there were slave women and what have you. Even if it's a slave woman, but she believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to only marry from our own faith. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the amma, the simple believer, the slave believer, whatever basic, as long as she's believing woman, she is more valuable in Allah's sight than marrying a non-Muslimah that has a status. She has all what pertains to the ideal marriage of a person, whether it's her status, it's her beauty, it's her fame, it's her family status, and what have you, in a society that everybody looks for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says a very simple believing woman is more valuable on Allah's side, because Allah is looking at partnership that's going to build a society. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the female side of the society, the female Muslim side. ولا تنكحوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولعبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now is talking about the female side of the believing women, is telling them and telling their guardians, their wali, do not marry your daughters to non-believing men. And the same example for a believing woman to marry a simple, basic, believing man that belongs to her status in faith is better than marrying a non-Muslim who is great in status, great in looks, great in connection, great in family, fame, tribes, highly educated, extremely recognized in society, what have you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a simple believing man is better and valuable in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the other one who is not a believing man. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ, none, the one who is not sharing your faith, they are calling, their path is on a different path than yours. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling the believers to belong to the path that leads them to Jannah and to forgiveness by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us his signs, and so we can reflect. So here we are learning today that the general rule, my dear brothers and sisters, is that believing men and believing women are not allowed in Islam to marry outside of their marriage, of their faith, outside of their faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not giving any room. Now the question is, how come now we have some marriages where Muslim men are able to marry non-Muslim women from the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews? Now that we learned the general rule, that's in the Quran. There is only one exception that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, and that's the general rule. And the exception of the general rule, you only allowed for men to marry the selected, my dear brothers and sisters, selected women from the people of the book. وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, just give an exception. What's the exception? وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. And the chastened women, the women of the book who have preserved themselves, who have been always conservative to the path, been devout women of the people of the book. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that this is an exception of a rule, and this exception of a rule is applying to a Muslim man who lives in a Muslim country that rules by the Islamic law and has got introduced. So just imagine yourself exactly the opposite of what we have here in the US or in Europe. You are imagining yourself in a Muslim country, rules by Islamic law, and then a Muslim man gets to be introduced to a non-Muslim woman, and they get interested, and he gets interested, and he sees that she is very, very close to Islam, and she respects Islam. She lives among Muslims, and she's very inclined to Islam. Allah allowed that to happen because the man in general in Islam takes the leadership, right? He's fully responsible for his family. So he marries her with that full responsibility, and she understands that. He carries the names, and his children carries his names. They are under his leadership, they are under his faith, they by nature become Muslims and whatever. She needs to understand that. The unfortunate fact nowadays here in the US or in Europe is that many of our young men, they don't understand that. They just think that they can just get married any women that they get interested in just because she's from the people of the book. But she's not meeting the criteria that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say وَنِسَاءُ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ and the women of the people of the book. No, he said وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. The criteria is al-muhsana. Al-muhsana is the reserved, preserved, conservative, devout women of the people of the book. That she has faith. That she just needs directions of to how the correct way of life, and she's inclined to become a Muslim, and she lives in a Muslim country. So in general, even if something happened, something wrong happen, the Islamic law would pertain to the family law. So there will be no fights over the kids and what have you. But here it's different. Here she is fully on in her land, and she has the law of the land that basically gives her the full right to take the children and to not adhere to the Islamic law, even if she agreed to it at the beginning. She agreed to marry a Muslim man, and she said, of course, when she was going through the excitement of marrying somebody, different than her culture, she was in approval of everything. And yes, of course, and I'm marrying according to the Islamic law, marriage, and adhering to the Islamic law guidelines, and she's really excited, and she's approving and saying yes, yes, yes. But at the end, if something happened within that marriage, she's not going to adhere to that anymore, and she definitely would adhere to the civic law, and she wants to get everything that is not inclined with our faith, and the fights over the kids happens, and the way that you would raise them, even inside the house, you would have major conflict between parents of how to raise the kids. The first scenario, when you are in a Muslim land, she adhered to it, and she's living in a Muslim land, right? So that's by nature, she's inclining to Islam. In a non-Muslim land, now she sees the father wants to raise his kids according to the Islamic law. She wants to do the opposite. She wants to raise them according to the Christian law and what have you, and customs and traditions. And the children are considered to be the victims now. So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want to happen. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a specific criteria. And we have to follow that specific criteria in order for our marriage to be fully intact and to be permissible and to be halal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our sons and daughters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our offsprings. Allahumma ameen, ameen. Inshallah, that would end tonight's session, and we will inshallah see you back on next Monday. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.